Well, this is John Black, Super Chemist, here on a new video called What is Race? Believe it or not, I can't believe it. Well, I can believe it. Most humans don't know what race is. It has two definitions. Obviously, we know the first definition I'm going to say is skin color, right? Black, white. And that has been around for, like the 1600s to the 1900s started, you know what I mean? But it became bigger in the 1900s. And then you have the second definition that is still today the definition. And it has been since the beginning of time. Since humans have existed, since humans have thought of the word race, this is the definition of it. That you have, it's basically about country origin. If you live in the same region, you have the same government, you have the same language or two languages, then that you are considered a race. Like the Germans, they're a race of people. At least the ones that are citizens of the German country. They live in the same region, they have the same government, they have the same language. So therefore, they are the German race. Everyone has heard this. The French race, especially the German race. Everyone heard that because of the, World War II, man. They're always saying the German race, the German race. Yeah, we're all races. Every country is a different race. Okay? And that's what the definition was. And I want you to think about it. It was never about skin color until recently, say the 1600s where it started. Because how could it? How could it be? Think about it. Just use your common sense. You don't have to read books. You don't have to whatever. I'm talking about before 1600. Think about the person, the average person. They're living on a farm, right? They got their little piece of land so they can have food. They're hunting, right? They don't have any, normally they only have contact with 5 other families that are close by that also have farms, right? There's no newspaper, no radio, no TV, there's no communication to know anything that's happening. You never leave your 5-mile or 10-mile radius. You never leave that area, ever. Your entire life. So you're basically just talking to like 50 people tops. And that's if you're lucky to have that many people to talk to. Most people could go their entire lifetimes only seeing like 30 people, 50 people. With no TV, no nothing. How would you even know? You can say, passed on from generation. Think about it. You're on a farm and you got kids. You think you're really talking about what's happening in Africa if you're in the UK, or you're talking about what's happening in Asia? These people didn't even know Asia existed. You know what I mean? Like, and to know what skin color they had, how would they? Unless you were like royalty or something, or traveler, you would not even know that these skin colors existed. How would you be racist against them? Yeah. Racism mostly was about religion before the 1600s, and after the 1600s, up to about the 1900s, when we switched over. 1600s it started to switch over. By the 1900s it has been completely switched over to where we mostly have racism against skin color, and we don't have that much racism against other religions. Like before slavery or whatever, even during slavery, black people were treated just like everybody else, man. And when people try to make their black neighbors become slaves, when they started making the slavery thing be about skin color, the white people in the neighborhood would stand up and be like, "Don't know, this black family has been our friend for decades. You can't be no." You know what I mean? Because they were the same religion. That's all that mattered back then. If you were Christian, then you were good. Black or white. And then it switched over, right? Uh, so slavery was never about skin color. Yeah, and slavery was never about skin color. All slaves in the history of our planet, in every country, uh, were always the poor people or criminals, or you fight a war and you enslave the losers. So they were all people that had no power. Those were the people that became slaves. They had to, didn't matter their skin color. If you were black and you were in Africa and you were poor, then you might become a slave. Same with any other country. And all the slave owners were all the elites. No matter what country you were in, doesn't matter the skin color. They were all elites. Oh, that's the commonality. Why doesn't anyone see that? They always got to be, oh, it's because it's white, because they're black, because of this, because of that. So I'm just making up a number here. Around 1917, I don't know why I haven't think of that year, but I'm not going to look it up again. But there was this book written by a guy, okay, a famous guy, and he said, and this is where the skin color really took off, was with his book. So it was like the late 1800s, very early 1700s, he wrote this book, and it took off. And in his book, he says, it's actually a good theory, you know what I mean, for his time, you know what I mean, because they didn't have DNA, they didn't even know what DNA was back then, basically. And the book was saying that all the skin colors, black, white, that, they're all different species. And that they had, through evolution, this branch of evolution produced this type of human, a black one, and this evolution from these animals over here made a white guy, and over here they all had common ancestors if you go back in the evolutionary ladder, far enough, but they all branched out before they became human, and those branches eventually created the black humans, white humans, red humans, blah blah blah. And this is where the color scheme came up. How we call American Indians red, we call Asians yellow. Brown, white, and black are obvious, but that's where this color scheme came in to apply to certain ethnicities or different species in his book, And the reason why I say that it's actually a good theory, man. I didn't read the book, but I've read many books that talk about this book, and yes, it sounds like a good theory to me if you don't know nothing about nothing. You know what I mean? If you're back in the 1800s or 1900s. And this is why I say, because he's so close, okay? It's actually a good guess, it's close, and I'm going to get into the truth, right? Because everyone on this planet is related to each other, and everyone on this planet has ancestors, if you go far back enough, that are black in Africa, okay? How do we know this? Mitochondrial DNA, okay? You might say, well, what's mitochondrial DNA? That's a special type of DNA, okay? All other DNAs are copied, and I'm simplifying everything, obviously. All the other DNA is copied and then transferred to your offspring, okay? And that makes a lot more mutations, you know what I mean? Mitochondrial DNA is passed on to the offspring in a different way than all the other DNAs, right? It doesn't copy it. It actually gives the offspring that gene, you know what I mean? That mitochondrial DNA, it gives them it, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have just one DNA thing in your body, you have a whole bunch. You just give them that. You don't copy it and give it to the offspring. Therefore, that cuts down on a lot of mutations, right? Because the mutation is going to happen when you copy it. And if you don't copy it and you just pass it on straight on, it's not going to be mutated as often, okay? Mitochondrial DNA, you'll get a mutation once every, say, I'm just roundballing it, say 30,000 years, okay? So, that means if humanity, like Homo sapien, has been around for 100,000, 200,000 years. 30,000 years means that there's three. If our species was 100,000 years old, that'd be only 3 mutations. Easy to follow, right? To track throughout the population. Even if we've been around for 200,000 years, right? The Homo sapiens species, right? That would only be 6 mutations. You know, every 33,000 years, right? That's a third of 100,000. So it'd be 3 and 3, 6 mutations out of our entire existence. There would only be 6 mutations. That's why it's easy to see and why it's so obvious if you're a DNA geneticist. You know what I mean? Because these mutations are so few and far in between that the first Homo sapien that had mitochondrial DNA passed on, there can only be a couple mutations. The woman today has that same mitochondrial DNA that first woman had. You know what I mean? And this mitochondrial DNA is passed on in the X chromosome. Okay? So that means, and there's only one mitochondrial DNA in the entire, I mean, obviously they didn't go around and test every human, but they tested humans here, in this country, in this country, in this country, and over here. And in each country, they didn't just go to this one spot. They picked a whole bunch of people out, you know, from poor, you know, rich, this, that, you know, a whole bunch of factors to get a whole diversity of people. And they found that everyone has the same mitochondrial DNA. And if they don't, they have one of these mutations. Like, they have these mutations that everybody has, like that you can track. You know what I mean? And if they track back to where no one had the mutations, it goes back to, you know, Africa. It all goes back to Africa. And it doesn't just go back to Africa. It goes back to there was actually an Eve. Okay? This is, you know, this, I tell people this, they act like I'm like making shit up. This is taught in colleges for the last 20 years, you idiots. Or at least the last 10 years. Yeah, I bet you it's been at least 20 years since it's been in colleges. And at least 30 years ago, when this is, you know, that they found it out and they told all the other DNA people, geneticists, and the geneticists, obviously, when you have a theory or whatever, they try to prove you wrong, right? Or prove you right. Everyone has proved it right. Everyone agrees. They agreed on it so much after 10 years that they started teaching it in colleges, on every college that teaches about genetics. Okay, this is not. Everyone agrees, you know, and not only does everyone agree, they've been agreed on it for decades now. Okay, like at least 30 years, 20 years that everyone has agreed. You know, 30 years most people agreed. It's been in books, magazines. People have been interviewed that are geneticists. They do documentaries about it. And many documentaries. I've seen at least 2 or 3 documentaries on it myself. Some of them where they're talking about the actual science of it, and some of it where they're. I totally lost my train of thought, man. Totally lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Okay, so I'll just move on. Oh yeah, the mitochondrial DNA. So there was only an Eve. There was an actual Eve. Okay, not from the Bible, just using that word term because she was the first one. Obviously, there were a bunch of Homo sapiens, right? And they were having offspring, but over the last 200,000 years, all those lineages died out, except for one woman's DNA, and everyone came from that DNA. Everybody. Oh, am I running out of time? Really? All right. Well, this is going to be part 2, then maybe even part 3. I don't know.